The hot spring trip was suggested by my husband, and it was supposed to be a delightful getaway just for the two of us. However, without telling me, he invited our son and his wife, with whom I have a strained relationship. When we arrived at the hotel, my son's wife bluntly said, "If you dislike being with Mike and me so much, why don't you sleep in the parking lot or somewhere around there?" Her mocking words, combined with my husband and son's failure to intervene, pushed me to my breaking point. "Fine, do as you please. I'll be sleeping outside then. Bye," I retorted and got into the rental car parked in the hotel lot, heading out for a night stroll to clear my mind. As I wandered the streets until dawn, I heard the sirens of ambulances and fire engines. When I turned my phone back on, I found an incredible number of missed calls from my husband and son. "What the hell are you doing? How many times do you think we called and texted you?" my husband demanded when I answered. He and my son were frantic, explaining that a careless smoking incident had caused a fire scare at the hotel. I was utterly appalled by their lack of apology, so I gave my husband one last chance. "Hey, which is more important to you? Mike and his wife or me?" "What? What's with that all of a sudden? Is this the time to be asking that? Just come back already," he replied. "I see, that's fine. Well, Mike is your child with that woman anyway, and it seems like I'm no longer in your eyes." Hearing these words, my husband and son were perplexed on the other end of the phone. That's when I decided to spill a secret, a hidden truth we had been carrying within our marriage. My name is Elizabeth, 46 years old, and this year marks the 20th anniversary of my marriage to James. We both work for a hobby manufacturer company, with James in sales and me in accounting, just as we have since our marriage. We were blessed with a son, Mike, who has become a delightful part of our lives by marrying Jennifer, a girl he met at university. To outsiders, we might appear to be a normal, happy family, but in reality, we are facing a certain issue. One day, as I was preparing dinner after returning home, I noticed James researching something on the computer. Curious, I peered over and saw beautiful resorts and hot springs displayed on the screen. I couldn't help but lean in closer with excitement. James turned to me and said, "Actually, I've been thinking about planning a trip soon." "A trip? That sounds wonderful." I couldn't contain my excitement and raised my voice. "See, we've both been busy working and haven't had much chance for this kind of thing. Don't you think it's about time we let loose a bit?" "Yes, I've been feeling the same way," he replied. Fortunately, outside of our busy seasons, we both have flexible schedules that allow for time off. Just thinking about the trip made me giddy with excitement, something that hadn't happened in years. Though James initially helped with household chores after our marriage, he eventually stopped, citing work as the reason, leaving me to handle most of it. This trip, suggested by James himself, was a much-needed break from the accumulated fatigue and stress, more than anything. I was happy when my husband, who usually only showed interest in his work and rarely conversed with me, suggested we go on a trip together. "The trip is a great idea," I said, "but there's something I've been hesitant to talk to you about." "Hesitant about what? What is it?" he asked. "You know what I'm talking about. It's about Mike and Jennifer." Hearing our son and daughter-in-law's names made my expression darken. Since advancing to junior high, Mike had grown distant and cold towards me, his mother. Ignoring my attempts to talk, he would lock himself in his room or go out, and on the rare occasions he did respond, it was with a dismissive, "It's nothing," or "Leave me alone." At times he was outright rude, demanding, "Hurry up with the food," or "Give me some pocket money." There were even instances when I was locked out of the house, not just by the door but by a chain gate. Initially, I dismissed it as a phase of rebellion, but when his harsh words and actions persisted, I grew concerned and consulted James several times. However, James brushed it off, saying, "Isn't that just a phase of rebellion? Or maybe just adolescence? You should understand that and deal with him properly as a mother," showing little concern for the matter. I tried to reach out to Mike, but his attitude remained unchanged. After advancing to high school, he moved into a dorm and continued living in one during university, hardly ever returning home. Even after marrying Jennifer, I wasn't invited to their wedding, and my letters of congratulations went unanswered. When Mike brought his wife Jennifer home, I immediately sensed a mismatch. Her brightly dyed hair, heavy makeup, and flamboyant attire made her appear quite flashy, even for her age. In front of James and Mike, Jennifer behaved normally. But the moment we were alone, she stared at me, then glared and said, "I wondered what kind of woman the mother of Mike would be, only to find out she's this plain. No wonder Mike detests you." Her derogatory words and expression cut deep. I thought Jennifer was indeed a perfect match for Mike. Interestingly, they didn't have any children and seemed to live a carefree life, despite their apparent dislike for me. Much like Mike's. From the day they were introduced, they began to frequent our house often, usually with Mike in tow. When they visited, Mike and Jennifer would lounge around, hurling insults at me, and even stay for dinner. I was left to prepare and clean up the meals alone while they arrogantly demanded more drinks and snacks, leaving me no peace. I rarely joined their conversations, but Jennifer once condescendingly said, "Elizabeth, why do you even work after getting married? Spending hours surrounded by old men making toys? I couldn't do that." Jennifer, being supported by Mike, doesn't work herself, and given her habit of skipping work, likely wouldn't last long in any job. Hearing her gleefully talk about skipping past jobs, I sighed inwardly. Unable to tolerate Mike and Jennifer's selfish and tyrannical behavior any longer, I once again sought advice from James. However, he simply said, "Mike is still as rebellious as ever, but Jennifer isn't that bad, right?" Feeling miserable, I replied, "But I'm being treated like a maid by Jennifer." I had my job too, and my body couldn't handle the stress any longer. Despite my concerns, James would just play dumb and brush it off, claiming he didn't know what to do. Eventually, the visits from Mike and Jennifer stopped. Whether they no longer wanted to see me or had other obligations such as work or finances, the reason was unclear, but their absence from our home was certain. Still, it seemed James continued to meet with them. Sometimes I could smell their perfume and cigarette smoke on him when he came home. As an asthmatic, cigarette smoke was particularly harmful to me, so I had asked Mike and Jennifer to refrain from smoking inside the house during their visits. Even with our strained relationship, I found relief in not having to endure their unpleasant behavior. I was determined to ensure they wouldn't interfere with our hot spring trip, and I worked hard to convince James of this. Relieved when he agreed, I looked forward to our trip to Hawaii. I pored over the guidebook daily, bought new clothes, and eagerly anticipated the vacation. However, the intrusion began on the very first day. As we arrived at the airport security check for our Hawaii-bound flight, pulling our suitcases and preparing to pass through the ticket gates, I was stunned to hear familiar voices. I turned around to see Mike and Jennifer standing there. "What? Why are you here?" I asked in disbelief. "Didn't Dad tell you? We decided to come along to Hawaii," Mike replied. I was dumbfounded and glared at James. "Mike and Jennifer have always dreamed of going to Hawaii," he said. "I'll handle them, so please let's go together." I was astounded. Despite all my efforts, including working hard and dieting for this trip, James still prioritized Mike and Jennifer. My plan seemed ruined, and I decided there was no point in going to Hawaii with such unpleasant feelings. As I was about to turn back, Mike and Jennifer stopped me. "For the past 11 years, I've wanted to reconcile with you, Mom, but I couldn't bring myself to be honest about it," Mike said. "I know my behavior wasn't right, and I realize now that I've been awkward and unfair. I want to get along with you, Elizabeth, and I don't want to strain our relationship any further." I was taken aback. It was the first time Mike had shown such humility, and Jennifer seemed eager to avoid appearing as the villain. Reluctantly, I agreed to go to Hawaii with the four of us. On the plane, Mike and Jennifer were in high spirits, ordering and starting to drink alcohol, while James sat happily next to me. Despite their upbeat mood, I felt an odd sense of unease and tried to distract myself by gazing at the scenery outside the window. Upon arriving in Hawaii and renting a car, we started our trip based on the plan James had revised on the plane. However, it wasn't long before Mike and Jennifer began to ignore my presence, speaking only to James. At water-based attractions like Sea Life Park and Waikiki Beach, they would intentionally trip me, making me fall and get soaked. At lunch, they pushed their leftovers onto me, among other forms of harassment. The tension escalated after dinner when Mike and Jennifer came to our hotel room, wanting to drink. When James went downstairs to get some snacks, Mike and Jennifer, who had bought alcohol in Hawaii, sat on my bed without asking. Mike pulled out an ashtray and cigarettes. "Hey, this is a non-smoking room. Stop it, please," I said. "It's fine if we ventilate," Mike replied with an annoyed look, and Jennifer began to light a cigarette as well. Reaching my limit, I shouted, "Enough. Stop smoking in a non-smoking room. You'll get us thrown out if you don't follow the hotel's rules." "What's with you all of a sudden?" Mike retorted. "I told you before that I have asthma and can't handle cigarette smoke. Please follow the hotel's rules, I said, struggling to keep my composure. Your serious motherly attitude has always been so irritating, Jennifer snapped. Smoking in a non-smoking room is the height of rudeness. God, you're so annoying. What's wrong with having fun on a trip? If you hate smoke so much, why don't you sleep in the parking lot or somewhere else? My head went blank from their words. Just then, James returned from his errand. Hey, it's loud even in the hallway. What's with all the shouting? I can't stand being with these two for another second, I said. They're trying to smoke in a non-smoking room, and why did you bring them along despite me saying no? This is unbelievable, I said, my pent-up emotions overflowing with tears. Mike and Jennifer looked down at me, smirking. You're just annoying, acting all high and mighty, Mike said with a smirk. You're no fun, not even drinking a single sip of alcohol. I felt something snap inside me. Fine, I get it. I'd rather sleep outside than stay here. Bye. Hey, Elizabeth, James began, but I quickly gathered my valuables and phone and stormed out of the room. James tried to stop me by grabbing my arm, but I shook him off. Leave me alone. I want to be alone, I said, my voice trembling. I hurried out of the hotel and made my way to the parking lot. There was no sign of James following me. I got into the rental car and drove around Hawaii at night, trying to clear my head. Despite my suspicions, Mike and Jennifer hadn't changed their attitude towards me, and James was no better. Despite my desperate pleas, he had brought Mike and Jennifer along without my consent. It's even possible to continue any semblance of a family relationship after this trip, especially with the secret about James and Mike that I had kept hidden. The more I thought about it, the more anger and sadness overwhelmed me, so I kept driving to calm myself down. As I drove through Hawaii's beautiful night scenery, my heated mind gradually cooled. After a while, tiredness set in, so I parked the rental car in a coastal park and decided to rest inside. I thought I heard sirens in the distance, but I was too exhausted to care and quickly fell asleep. When I woke up, dawn had broken, and the sparkling sea greeted me with its beauty. Soothing my spirits, I had breakfast at a seaside diner and then remembered to check my phone. I had turned it off before driving because I didn't want to hear from James or see his texts. Now, calm, I turned on my phone and was shocked by the number of missed calls and texts starting from around 11 o'clock last night. There were at least 30 or 40 of them. Just then, a call from James came in. What the hell are you doing? Do you know how many times we've tried to reach you? I've called and texted you. James's voice was a mix of anger and distress. What do you mean? I just had breakfast at a seaside diner, I replied, confused. While we're in deep trouble, you're casually having breakfast. Mike's voice came through, irritated. What trouble are you talking about? It's exactly as it sounds, James said. After you left, we had a little party with cigarettes, alcohol, and snacks. Before we knew it, we fell asleep, and when we woke up, the room was filled with smoke. A fire? I asked, horrified. Yes, James confirmed. The cause was Mike and Jennifer's cigarettes not being fully extinguished. Thankfully, it was just a small fire, but the fire trucks arrived in droves, and everyone in the hotel had to evacuate. Now we're being blamed for it. Jennifer suffered a minor burn and was taken to the hospital. Mike and I have to go to the police for questioning and apologize to the hotel staff. I see now, the sirens I heard last night must have been for that, I said, stunned by the extent of their carelessness. Then James, in his usual carefree and irresponsible manner, said, So, we're tied up here and can't leave. Can you go to the hospital and stay with Jennifer? The lack of apology and his prioritization of Jennifer over me made it clear that some things would never change. I decided to give James one last chance. James, who is more important to you, me or Mike and Jennifer? What? Why are you asking that now? This isn't the time, James replied, sounding bewildered. Well, I said, by then, I was completely disillusioned with James's attitude. Hey, what do you mean? Don't joke around at a time like this, James said, his frustration evident. Well, Mike is your child with that woman, and it seems I'm no longer in your thoughts, I said, as both James and Mike looked confused by my words. I took a deep breath and decided it was time to reveal the secret I had kept hidden. Mike, you are the child of your father and his mistress, I said firmly. Mike was stunned into silence and James grew visibly agitated as I continued. 24 years ago, James had an affair with a woman who worked with us at the time. By the time I discovered the affair, she was already pregnant. She had the audacity to tell me, "I'll give you the child, so don't demand any compensation." I found her contemptible, but I couldn't bear the thought of abandoning the child. So, I decided to raise the child, yourself, as my own without seeking any compensation. The mistress was fired, and James's affair became known, but taking you in helped soften the blow. Despite not being biologically related, I raised you as my own. However, your rebellious phase began in middle school and only worsened over time, which I initially thought was normal adolescent behavior. As the years went by, your attitude grew increasingly challenging. Realizing you were indeed the child of James and his mistress, I was torn between the affection I had developed for you and the harsh reality. Mike, still in shock, shouted through the phone, "That can't be true. I can't just be some bastard child. I have proof of your father's affair." I said, "I keep it with me because I didn't trust James to keep it safe." "So, you're saying you're not my real mother?" "That's what I've been trying to tell you. I try to be a real mother, but it's clear we don't get along. Maybe it's because you carry that woman's blood." Mike fell silent, grappling with the gravity of the revelation. James's voice rose in frustration. "What are you saying? You promised you wouldn't tell Mike." "I don't care about promises. Be grateful for the 24 years I've put up with this," I retorted before ending the call. I blocked both James and Mike and decided to enjoy the rest of my Hawaii trip on my own, returning to New York before them. Back home, I packed up my belongings, moved back into my parents' house, and prepared divorce papers for James. A colleague later informed me of the aftermath of their hot spring trip. They were severely reprimanded by the police for their negligence, and the hotel demanded a hefty compensation for the disturbance caused by smoking in a non-smoking room. With my parents' help, they managed to navigate the legal and financial fallout. My divorce from James was finalized smoothly and soon became the topic of office gossip. James's work performance declined, leading to his quiet resignation. He struggled to find new employment, eventually borrowing money from various acquaintances and declaring bankruptcy. Mike's financial and mental stability also deteriorated, leading to constant arguments with Jennifer. As for me, I found solace in the hot springs during my solo trip and now visit several times a year with my parents and friends. My work has flourished and I've been promoted to head of the accounting department.